All right, so let's go ahead and finish up the intro in lecture one. So we have a bunch of different flow analysis techniques, and they're going to be divided up into how we study in this course. So first we'll start with chapter one, where we'll talk about fluid friction. Then we'll go into chapter two, which is hydrostatics, or fluids not moving, and then fluids going to start to move. And we'll start with control volume analysis, which is an extension of what you did in thermodynamics. So we'll still use the energy equation. What we're going to do in control volume analysis is just look at the edges of your control volume, so your inlets and your exits, just like we did in thermo. What's going to be different is we're now going to add F equals MA to the overall picture. We're also going to do differential analysis, which means we're going to look at every point in the flow. We're going to be able to come up with that velocity profile for the pipe that you see above. And we're also going to do experimental analysis, so we'll find out that things get complicated really quickly and analytical methods aren't going to work always for us. So we're going to have to switch to experimental, and so we'll cover that in chapter 5. And then 6 and 7, chapters 6 and 7 are some applications that use all of these previous techniques. So one of the things we're going to do is classify our flows. So we get a fluids problem, and one of the first things we usually do is make assumptions. And these different classifications are usually what are going to comprise our assumptions. Is it steady? Is it unsteady? Incompressible? Compressible? Is it still, or is it in motion? And is it 1D or 2D or 3D is going to be too complicated for us usually. And viscosity is something we're going to cover next time. So remember, with the steady versus unsteady, something to remember on this is anything different? So ask yourself the question, is anything different 5 minutes from now? If so, it's unsteady. And much more difficult for us to solve if it's unsteady. Another classification that doesn't fall into those categories is laminar versus turbulent flow. We saw this once before, but laminar is the smooth kind of a flow. It would have, it would be, if you followed a particle, it would be just going along nicely. Turbulent is the chaotic. So here's your particle. That's what a turbulent particle, fluid particle, is doing. Okay, and like I said before, it's usually hard to see what's going on inside of fluids problem when the fluids are moving. So we have different kinds of flow visualization techniques, and we're going to see some of these in the lab. Some are actually experimental and some are kind of mathematical. So a path line, for instance, would be, say you drop a piece of grass in a river and then you video that piece of grass. That would give you a path line, the way the grass moved through the water. That would give you a path line, and that would give you some information about how the fluid is moving. A streak line, on the other hand, we'll do this in the lab. Just put a tap in there with some dye coming in, and you get a whole streak of particles. So it's basically coloring particles as they pass by that little dye input spot. So you get a streak line. That gives you a lot of information. A timeline is just a bunch of streak lines, basically, across a whole flow, or several streak lines, and that could give you, say, a velocity profile kind of thing. A streamline, that's one that's more mathematical. So basically, that is a line that's tangent to the velocity vector at every time. Okay, so you say, oh, it's mathematical, so what good is it? Well, that's what you're going to get when you do computational fluid mechanics. Computational fluid mechanics. Okay, which is basically when you let the computer solve your fluids problem for you. And we will do that in the lab as well. So for flow over a wing, if you see, for instance, all these velocity vectors, you draw a line that's tangent to all those velocity vectors, what you end up with is a streamline. Okay, and a streamline is actually very useful for us. So not only in CFD, but another thing that makes it useful is if it's tangent to the flow at every point, that means no flow is perpendicular to it, which means no flow can go across it, which means you can use it as an edge of a control volume as if it is a wall. Okay, because no flow is going to go through it. So then if you do mass in equals mass out, for instance, conservation of mass, you can just use that streamline like a wall. So that helps a lot with our external flow kind of problems. Okay, and that's what I'm going to say down here. Since velocity is tangent, you can't have perpendicular, so flow, so mass can't cross a streamline. No flow crosses a streamline. And we can use it as edges of our control volume. You can also have a whole bunch of streamlines if you want, and you can use a stream tube, it's called, a bundle of streamlines, as your control volume walls as well. So flow inside a stream tube must remain inside the tube. So you can use that as a whole control volume. All right, and basically for steady flow though, remember streamlines, streak lines, path lines are all the same. However, if it's unsteady, that won't be the case. All right, so that's it with our intro. Go ahead and finish the quiz, and you'll be done with your pre-work for your first lecture, and I will see you in class.